Welcome everybody to the Capital Connecting Conference. We're so glad that you're able to make it today. We've got a great agenda. It's action-packed, and because of that, we want to make sure we get going on it. I want to first, Mayor Lauren McLean, are you still in the house here? She was just here, and I wanted to tell her thanks for coming. And it's really good to be able to see our local mayor have the engagement with the tech community and how important that is in the city of Boise and in Idaho. I have to start with just a really quick joke because everybody know who Henry Winkler is? Yeah, okay, what was he? The Fonz. Okay, so you know he was thrown in jail just recently because he did a Fonzie scheme. Was that all right? Everybody, is that okay? Jason, is that all right? Is that all right? Yeah, okay. All right, I heard that a long time ago, and I just came back to my memory. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a chance. This is going to be a fantastic event, and I'm really sorry that I'm sitting here right now, and I haven't met one of my speakers, but I know she's here. But before we get going, one of the sponsors of this event and the reason we're in this room is because of Zions Bank, and we have a member of our executive committee on the board of the trustees for the Idaho Technology Council, Jesse Rano, and we'd just like Jesse to come up and welcome you and just say a few words. Let's hear it for Jesse.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for everybody being here today. It's great to have you in this room and great to have this event. Zions Bank is one of the founding members of the Idaho Technology Council and early on partnered with Jay and some of the other members to bring this organization to the state of Idaho because we had a very deep belief in the power that this type of a community could influence in the state for helping foster our technology ecosystem and also helping to foster a culture of entrepreneurship, not only here in the Valley, but across the state. So as the ITC has expanded and matured over the years, we've been able to see a lot of growth and a lot of positivity. This event is the culmination of one of those outgrowths and expansion. So a few years ago, Blake Hansen, Blake, raise your hand, back there in the back, yeah. Blake Hansen and Jay put together the Deal Flow report, which led into our premier event in this space, the Capital Conference that is in May. And we had such great participation and great success around that event. We've added smaller events like this Capital Connecting Conference today to help further that work and provide additional opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors and mentors and successful companies to network and to grow. So today we're here to help continue that work and that effort, and we're thankful that you're all in attendance. Just a little bit about Zions Bank that I think is very important. We have a very, very rich history of recognizing our place in the economies that we operate in as a financial steward to be able to provide guidance and direction and access to capital to help grow those local economies. We believe that the people that are best positioned to make the decisions are those who are closest to the problems and the challenges that are being faced. And so locally, we have a group of talented bankers here in the room. If you are with Zions Bank, will you please stand up for a second? Just stand up and wave so that everybody knows who you are. Let's give these guys, men and women, a round of applause. Oftentimes, the profile of young entrepreneurial companies don't necessarily fit with the profile from a bank. And so working with organizations like the ITC to foster additional means for providing capital in the economy is very important to us. I'm excited for the agenda today and excited for the opportunity to listen to some great speakers and understand that we will have a wonderful event. So without any further ado, thank you again for coming. I'll turn it back over to Jay.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate that. We also want to make sure our board members, if you're here, please stand up. We would like to acknowledge that because without our board who gives a great deal of advice and suggestions to us, that's great. Vaughn Hansen just came off of our chair of our board, and Paris Cole just is from Truckstop.com is going to be our new chair of the ITC. So We also want to make sure we recognize in the back we have Allison Johnson with Holland and Hart. They're right back here. Thank you. Allison, raise your hand, please. I think everybody knows you. And then right next to her is Blake Hansen from Alturas Capital. They're the co-chairs of the Capital Connect group, which really puts everything to this and the brain thrust of everything, to have the vision of everything that's taking place. So let's hear it for Allison and Blake. I also want to make sure this year we're going to be, sorry about that, this is the deal flow from last year. If you haven't looked at this, it's on the Idaho Technology Council website where you can look at it. And Joni, I just see you right here by your picture. So thank you very much for being here. And make sure that you look at this, and then the new report will be put out on the 21st of May. So, and it's looking really, really good at this point. So. Let's go ahead. The other part that I want to make sure is that one of the biggest things that the Idaho Technology Council has, we've always had 20 focus groups. I've mentioned this several times to people, but in those 20 focus groups, we always look at talent, but the second thing that most of these business leaders talk about is the need to have capital to continue to grow and scale their company. And so you can really directly correlate how strong your innovative ecosystem is with the capital that comes in various ways. So that's the reason this is so important for us, is to be able to say capital is a major part of growing an ecosystem, and the measurement of that is critical to that. Now, the biggest part also is the ability to tell stories about this. So that's what we're going to have today, is just the story about how people have grown. And that's generally like a couple of years ago, we had Brad Wiskerson and Faisal Shah talk about how they've grown, Count, and other companies that have been part of that. Now we have a chance to be able to hear from somebody. Our first speaker is actually going to be Joni Kindwall Moore, who is from Coeur d'Alene. And she's going to talk to us about Snacktivist. And the fun thing about this is that Joni is an entrepreneur who has grown and I believe has 3 children. And when you start thinking about those children and they're young, what are the biggest things you want to do for your children? You want them to have the best environment, the best food, the best education, everything like that. And as an RN, Joni has sit there, looks at all these things, and is very, very concerned about what goes in and how health really influences the way that we perform and what we do. She's also a really big food system activist. And just talking to her for about 40 minutes on the phone, you could see the passion she has for that. So we're going to hear from Joni right now and have an opportunity to have her tell us a little bit about her story. So Joni, welcome.
Hi, you guys. I'm Joni with Snacktivist Foods. I'm sure many of you may be actually unfamiliar with Snacktivist Foods as we come from our state's panhandle up north. And I'm just really grateful to Jay and everybody for bringing me down here to Boise for the event today. And it's a big honor, especially to start a conversation when we're going to have people like Andy Scoggins giving a talk, Colin and Matt talking about my favorite food group, which is coffee. And other than grains, I get really excited about coffee. And yeah, so this brings me to my story of Snacktivist Foods. So if you did read a little bit of our description, I'm sure the first thing that popped out to you was gluten-free. Yes, gluten-free. So, I mean, it's a topic we can thank for many great memes, funny jokes on the internet, eye rolls and terrible pizzas across America. But let's get real. No one ever associates gluten-free with a good time. It's just one of those things, even though it is so important. So we like to laugh about that. We want to make this a different transition into our cultural vernacular of food. So how many of you in the audience actually lean towards gluten-free or have a family member that needs to be gluten-free, has food allergies, vegans? Anyone with grandkids in college? You have vegan grandkids probably. And you can see just by the number of hands in the audience that this food inclusivity is actually a huge issue in America right now, affecting millions of people. In fact, there was a recent article that was published in the Journal of American Medical Association that estimated that 10% of the adult population has some sort of food allergy or sensitivity. That's over 26 million Americans. That's a huge portion of our population. So it's actually getting to the point where we can consider it an epidemic. So we'll go to the next screen. So my family is one of these 20 million families that live in a home with food allergies. And this is the motivation that led us to create Snacktivist Foods. I grew up on a farm. We had tons of chickens. Go figure, I'm allergic to eggs. It's one of those funny things. My son, as it turns out, after hours and hours at pediatric gastroenterology appointments, cannot tolerate wheat. And then I had another child, my oldest, my daughter, who was allergic to milk. So as you can imagine, no one wanted to invite us over for dinner. We had become that family. And so, it was difficult for us to find foods that our whole family could enjoy, but were still really quality and flavor forward. And thousands of hours of iteration in the kitchen led us to develop some special trade secrets that made not only a flavorful product, but a product that had an amazing texture, and led us to become really interested in the space of sustainable ancient grains. We now produce a line of baking mixes and finished product cookies and that are made from ancient grains like millet, teff, and sorghum. And our mantra as Snacktivists is that it's not what we leave out of our food that makes it special, it's what we put in it. So we're always very focused on quality and sustainability. Let's see, I'm still on this slide. So now where things get excited, when I talk about Snacktivists, I am passionate about food allergy inclusivity, but I get really passionate about the ingredients in our supply chain and the sustainability that plays into that. Because I am not just, nothing against moms with kids with touchy tummies, but I'm also a scientist with a degree in botany and a background in pharmaceutical chemistry. I'm an ICU nurse with a background in cardiovascular ICU and diabetic education. I'm a food system activist, as Jay said, and I'm an innovator. And I tend to really lean into the innovation side, especially when it comes to larger problems that go outside of our kitchen and start to affect our entire nation. So these scientific roots combined with a passion for food systems has the power to transform our company from moms who are making cookies to a global food industry leader. Next slide. So I do admit it, I'm a foodie. I love the whole experience surrounding food preparation, food cultivation, and enjoying food with loved ones around the table. It's actually kind of sacred to me. I come from a farming family and I grew up farming, so I think that's part of it. But from an academic perspective, I'm not only thrilled by the nutrition, but I'm very thrilled about the history behind our food. And anyone who knows me knows I have a real history nerd side. So I'm just gonna step aside for a second to talk a little bit about food history. So grains were domesticated roughly 20 to 30,000 years ago in what's called the Fertile Crescent. And that's where we first saw the development of wheats, barleys, pulses, flax, and it really changed humans fundamentally forever. We became a civilized agricultural group of people. In other parts of the world, they were domesticating millets, sorghums, teffs, quinoas, amaranths, buckwheats, all kinds of amazing ancient supergrains that we don't actually eat very often anymore. But the world has changed dramatically since the days of the earliest farmers. Rapid population growth, changes in climate, global migrations of people and cuisine have really had huge impacts on our food systems. And this leads us to the modern era. So the biggest historical event that changed our American eating habits happened about 70 years ago during World War II. So during World War II, we had the vast majority of our young men had to leave and go fight the war. This left us very scarce, not only on food, but on people to work the farms. This had a massive impact on our food systems because following the war, we had this amazing ingenuity event where we developed mechanizations that would help us produce food more efficiently. And young people started leaving America's farms. Women entered the workforce, and time and knowledge of cooking and baking became very scarce. These economic and cultural changes dramatically impacted our dietary habits and still do today. Between the decades of 1950 and 2010, the per capita intake of wheat dramatically increased. It's estimated that it's actually over doubled since 1950. So this leads me back to Snacktivist. Most of these wheat-based foods that we eat now today are so highly refined, they could almost be considered a wheat extract. So to me, as a scientist and as a nurse, it's no wonder that so many people are suddenly having digestive problems related to wheat. And this often leads into other systemic allergies and illnesses. Bottom line is, modern food is feeding us. There's a lot of miracles here, but modern food is also killing us. And it's killing our farming economy too. Monocrop farming, chemical input dependency, expensive proprietary seeds, and pressure from a global commodities market has dealt a crushing blow to America's farmers, who are now experiencing historically high bankruptcy and suicide rates. Intense weather patterns haven't helped at all either. Farmers are aging out, and there's just no one to take over our families' farms. In the Midwest, this is especially true. I consider this to be a national security issue that requires an in-depth look at the grain industry and our entire food system. The same ingredients that are contributing to our trillion-dollar healthcare implosion are also the same crops that are helping bankrupt our farmers. We can continue to learn lessons from civilizations of the past when it comes to food systems. And this goes far beyond our just nutrition and diet. We need to stop and think about how food and food cultivation affects our environment, our economy, and our geopolitics. My husband is a trauma RN, and he's a Marine Corps veteran. He's also a scholar of history, so he's an expert on the rise and falls of civilizations. Foreign invasions, civil wars, disease. These have always been the top 3 reasons why major empires would crumble, right? But a closer look reveals, here's my inner scientist and botany nerd, a closer look reveals that dwindling topsoil, food insecurity, and malnutrition usually lays the foundation for the rest of these factors to manifest. So when I look around, I say, here we are in 2020, we're facing a lot of these same predicaments as many empires did before us. To fix these complex issues, we're going to have to disrupt our current food and agricultural sector in a good way. Leveraging technology will be a huge part of this. Next slide. So the decentralization of the grain and cereal vertical has begun, and it's in large part due to the consumer demand that's creating a bottom-up pressure on our largest grain institutions and fueling rapid growth of independent brands. Large cereal vertical dominators know this, and they're very acutely aware because it is a consumer-driven trend. Consumers are not only looking for better-for-you options, they're also looking for sustainable, organic, non-GMO, and inclusive foods. So what really started these dietary crazes? I mean, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, so when I was a teenager, everybody carb-loaded. It was like the non-fat days. Do you remember those? No one ate any of that stuff. And then all of a sudden the Atkins diet came around. And now we have keto, paleo, grain-free. And really, when you think about it, it's kind of a grain demonization movement. Well, you know, civilization was built on grain. Civilization was built on wheat and barley and corn and all these amazing crops that keep the thousands of people in all these regional economies employed and also feed the entire world. So one of the things I'd like to think about when I'm talking to people is like, do we ever think about how much money our love of avocados, coconut oil, and other imported foods are putting in the hands of cartels and potential terrorist organizations overseas? Something to think about. When we look at our shifting domestic grain production, we can grow superfoods in our own backyard. And then we keep that money in our local economy. Can we feed a global population without grains and pulses? No, we can't, and we shouldn't for many reasons. So a food systems mindset approach is what we need for the future of our country. Next slide, please. So this shift has created a gap in the market and a need for smaller, agile, consumer-facing brands. Snacktivist Foods is focused on these opportunities, and our changing grain and cereal sector is beckoning for help from brands like us. We yearn to bring value to these crops that have a beneficial role in regenerative ag and soil building, as well as the potential to feed the planet sustainably into the future. I really believe that integrating ancient grains back into our widely consumed products is a first step in redefining our grain-based staples. And as they have nutritional value as well as potential for functional food status because of antioxidant levels and other special nutritional qualities. They're also of significance when we diversify our agricultural mosaic away from monocropping and the cycles of chemical input dependency. I work a lot with WSU cereal breeders and help write grants with a lot of our scientists up in U of I, and there are a lot of people working, and where their gap is they don't have a value-added partner to take a lot of these to market. So Snacktivist definitely provides a role of bringing the science and the innovation that's happening in our grain and cereal sector to consumers. We're setting out to help disrupt this grain vertical and help reform America's grain consumption patterns. This is a beyond organic, beyond gluten-free, beyond all the free from stipulations, and fear-driven marketing. Because food is important, and we believe the core of this movement needs to be soil. So how do we shift millions of people to consume grains in a new way? This shift is a more diversified commodity profile, and it has huge impacts on economics too. This could really give America's farmers a boost, a time during unprecedented suffering. In fact, I just this morning had an email plea from a group of farmers in Eastern Washington that want to grow millet for us, especially now that we've been to Korea and we're looking at millet exportation, and they are desperate to diversify. They need to for profits. Millet has been outperforming corn and wheat the last few years in the commodities markets. So, you know, we as a brand, we had very humble beginnings, making simple baking mixes, cookies, but this is just the beginning. Next slide, please. So how does a tiny, privately financed company in northern Idaho grow to become a disruptive force like this? Well, to be honest, it's extremely difficult, and the barriers to entry are formidable, especially when you're trying to get attention in larger retailers, larger food service venues as well. The need for third-party safety audited facilities, distribution, competitive price points, they all contribute to the 85% failure rate of new brands in the CPG space. Getting audience with buyers and distributors is nearly impossible, as is raising money is very, very hard for early startups because CPG is a capital-intensive thing. So I'm always grateful to people like Zion Bank because not so many banks are willing to even work with little companies like us. So thank you, Zion Bank. So far, we have been very deliberate in our fundraising as a brand, and we've done a small just friends and family round and been very, very scrutinizing of our funds, and we've bootstrapped our way through it. So I'm appreciative to all the people who have lent a lot of wisdom, hard work, and input to get our company to where it is today. 2019 was a challenging year. We launched a pilot of a finished product cookie, which you all got to sample. That was just a test run, but it actually, we produced something that could go out on the shelves and had a shelf life, which is extremely difficult to do without a lot of preservatives and added things. So we were really happy to actually meet that milestone. We rebranded our entire company, expanded our trademarks, defended our existing trademarks, developed relationships with scalable strategic partners, restructured our company to be cloud-based so we can accommodate growth with a remote team, and we laid the groundwork for growth last year. We're already seeing so much potential. I want to actually do a shout out. I saw Kim here earlier. Idaho Department of Ag Market Development has been super helpful. We had a chance to represent Idaho at the Fancy Food Show in San Francisco last month, where we had one-on-one talks with Target, one-on-one talks with H-E-B, other huge retailers and food service people across the nation. And I just really want to sincerely thank them for the help and support that they've given to companies like Snacktivist. We also got to go to Korea with them just this last fall, and I was absolutely amazed at the potentials overseas. As countries like Korea really are dependent on imports. They can't grow enough food to feed their country. So Snacktivist could be a valuable tool to getting the best of what the Northwest has to offer to overseas markets. We feel strongly that we will be the brand that helps to mend a lot of this interface that needs to happen in innovation in our agricultural and food sectors. We're going to do it, and we're going to take our farmers along with us. So thank you.
Just 1 second. I got a couple of questions for you.
I bet you do.
So really quick, this has been, so you won an award over at the Boise Startup Week 2 years ago. What was
Trail
it?
mix.
Trail Mix.
The first trail mix.
The very first one.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
It was very cool.
And then you just came back from a big food event.
Mm-hmm.
What did Target say about you?
Target, they were absolutely impressed and told us that we were the food brand of the future, basically. So we're working with them now. We're working with some of their product development experts and their lead of global supply chain to develop a line that would be appropriate for Target's shelves.
Very, very
So,
good.
yeah.
And you're on Albertson shelves?
We did a trial of our
Trial
cookie
right now?
there, yeah, but then we're going to switch to a new manufacturer, so we don't have anything on the shelves at Albertsons. I've pitched the dry mixes to them,
Well, good.
but
We'll have Andy talk. Yeah, that'll even better.
I told you I was a little, that frustration with buyers is a real.
It's a challenge.
They work very hard, in all fairness. So
Very, very good. And you Any last thoughts on funding that you're doing right now?
Yeah, actually, we're going to be opening a bridge round right now because we did a very small pre-seed. We're doing a bridge round to get us to our seed round, which will happen next year. So we're opening that tranche here in the next month. It's just a small pre-seed.
Okay, that's beautiful. So we'll keep our eyes on Snacktivist because wonderful things are going to be happening on
Yeah,
this. Let's hear it for
thank
Joni.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. Trade you. So you can see that if you are in the audience right now, and if you have worked or are in the food anywhere within the food industry, please raise your hand. Just keep it up for a little bit. Okay. So this is a big opportunity for us in Idaho because of all of the resources that we have here. So thank you very much, Joni, for the work that you've done now. Let's go to the next one. And this is creating the Iron Mule. And this is great because we're having Matt Bishop and Colin Seeley, and both of them, just really quickly, are both innovators. I love them to tell a little bit about themselves. I found out a little bit more about Matt. Had graduated from the United States Naval Academy, and he actually has like several years in. I don't want to offend you in any way because I know you could probably take me out or something.
Not gonna happen.
Okay,
I'm a little guy.
I don't know but this is really good. And also, Matt grows wheat in his front yard. You need to ask him about that at some other time. And the other part about this is Colin also has again some great stories that they're going to tell you about. But one thing that's interesting is he has 2 children, and he thinks he wants to travel. He'd love travel, but he needs to want to go back on traveling again. So he can talk about that a little bit more. Let's hear right now some Cafe Mule and Ironside Roasting. Let's hear it for him.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Bishop. This is my partner in Iron Mule Inc., Colin Seeley. I was the initial founder of Cafe Mule. Before that, I grew up in northern Wyoming. I did attend the United States Naval Academy. That was my ticket out of Wyoming. And upon graduation, I accepted a Marine Corps commission. I did a few Iraq tours in the early 2000s. In 2008, I decided to leave the Marine Corps, went to Georgetown for an MBA, decided I didn't really love corporate life, and I accepted a commission in the Army Guard, ended up ultimately serving as an Army Special Forces officer, and then in 2015, I got out of the military altogether. In 2016, I became extremely passionate that I wanted to create, in the foothills behind us, I wanted to create a community venue for people who could come from disparate elements of the community, congregate, drink coffee, cross-pollinate. And I thought that the best way to do this would be to load a bunch of coffee up on a mule, a pack mule, which I Craigslisted a mule, which led to a really interesting conversation with my wife of why I was Craigslisting a mule. Put a bunch of coffee on him, took him up into the foothills, and started serving coffee for free. So we've done 39 of those coffee services to date. It's not a great business plan when you're serving coffee for free. So I created a coffee company to support this social mission, and I focused on cold brew coffee, which was an opportunity locally at the time. And in 2017, I realized that I really needed to find a great technical, robust roasting partner. And that's when I found Colin.
All right, thanks, Matt. My name is Colin Seeley. I grew up in Northern California, made the great decision to move to Idaho for college, and I got my degree in food science and technology from the University of Idaho. After college, I moved to Southern Oregon. I was able to do some product development work in the fruit industry for Treetop. And that was okay, but I realized that I wanted to go back to school. I found a really unique project-based master's program through Cornell University. So I spent some time on campus at Cornell, and then I completed my project work in Zambia, where I studied value-added food production in rural Africa, which was an amazing opportunity. Came back to the States, thankfully came back to the West Coast, did not like the East Coast. And I was really lucky and fortunate to find a job with a pretty young startup right here in Boise Happy Family Brands. It's an organic baby food company. And I spent 4 years there, all the way through till just after they sold to Danone. So that was a really great experience and a fun ride. Right after my exit, pretty much immediately after, I bought a small roaster. Well, my first roaster was about yay big. It did about a pound every 15 minutes. And I started Ironside Roasting Company in my garage. Ironside was one of the first of the new generation of craft roasters in the Treasure Valley. Last couple years, next slide, thanks. There's Richard. Everyone's been waiting to see him, so there he is. So partnered with Maddie and formed Iron Mule. And over the last couple of years, we've developed 3 of our own in-house brands, as well as a handful of contract roasting partnerships. So that brings us to today, and we want to spend the rest of our time telling you where we want to go next.
All right, so when we look at our future as a company, we want to be in the center of this Venn diagram here. So we're very real about the challenges that we face as a local craft roaster. It's an industry that has a relatively low barrier to entry, and when you're this local craft roaster, all of your brand equity is relevant for about 100 or 200 miles. And then those other communities have their own local roasters who grow up their own brand equity there. So we face that head on. When we look at our customers, we see a continuing pull for products that support a strong social mission and have transparency within their supply chain. And then when we look at our industry, specialty coffee specifically, the greatest challenge to specialty coffee right now is providing a long-term sustainable income for the 80% of small growers that make up the industry. And so a small grower is considered to be about 5 acres or less, and that's 80% of the specialty coffee industry's output. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the coffee industry. Don't worry about this. This is a bit of an eye chart if you're sitting further away, but this is 45 years of the C market. And so what is the C market? The C market is the commodities market price that Arabica coffee is traded for. And this is the price that you would pay as a roaster if you wanted to buy a pound of green coffee when it comes to port here in the US. Specialty coffee is a subset of this and is sold oftentimes at a premium. So the 2 things to really point out, the C market is incredibly volatile and it's traditionally been low. There's no real chance that the C market is going to climb and sustain any sort of higher price for long term, because Brazil and Vietnam are both capable of producing machine-picked industrial Arabica coffees, and they dump them on the market and it drags down the price for everyone else. So if you're a smallholder farmer and you're producing specialty coffee, traditionally you're producing that on steep terrain and you're having to hand-pick that coffee. As you look here, the C market rarely gets above $2. It's been under $1 for most of the last year. It's roughly about $1 right now. And the Latin America average production cost for a pound of specialty coffee is $1.35. So the premium that you get for specialty coffee is currently not making up that differential. So we like to compare what's happened with coffee over the past 10, 15 years to what's happened with beer. So think of 10, 15 years ago, you go buy a 6-pack, you have Coors, Miller, Bud, what have you, maybe you're gonna pay $5 or $6. Now you can go down to the grocery store and you can easily spend $10, $12 on a 6-pack of craft beer. See the same thing in coffee. You used to have a very monochromatic offering from a quality standpoint. You were gonna end up paying $6, $7 for a pound of coffee. Now I can go to the grocery store and easily drop $12 to $15 for a 12-ounce bag of coffee. Millennials are currently the largest demographic in the workforce, and we believe strongly that they're going to continue to make their purchasing decisions with their ethics. And we think they will choose products that have very clear supply chains and are supporting a strong social mission again. Next slide.
All right, so there's undeniably a coffee price crisis. And a lot of the industry publications over the last year have been dedicated to addressing this. So as Matt and I dug deeper into this, we identified really 3 critical questions. So what can we do to uncouple the green coffee price from that C market that's highly, that fluctuates all the time? How can we disrupt the supply chain and operate differently and go above and beyond even what direct trade and fair trade have been able to accomplish? And then third, as a business, how can we scale our brands, but also achieve differentiation in a very crowded marketplace? Next slide. And we believe we have answered those questions, and we're calling our solution Direct Access Coffee. So Direct Access Coffee is kind of a new way to look at the supply chain, and it does uncouple green coffee from the C market and attaches it to the US retail market. This allows farmers to achieve much higher margins as well as long-term financial stability. So the way we would do this is we want to, instead of running our brand like in the traditional sense, we want to work for the farmers as a vertically integrated service provider. So what that means is we would usher their coffee through the supply chain, importing, export, import, roasting, packaging, brand management, all the way through the distribution chain to grocery. The way this looks practically is what we call a meta brand. So the meta brand is essentially a placeholder on the grocery store shelf that allows us to rotate coffees in from our partner farms. Oftentimes, farmers need to get paid immediately to cover costs or just to survive. So we've worked a financing model into direct access as well. Next slide, please.
I'm going to quickly just compare the 2 models. So on the top of the slide is the status quo. This is how we operate right now. So you'll notice there's a number of players there. You have a farmer who's selling to a co-op to do processing. They're selling on to a series of exporters and importers to get their coffee into a grocery distributor. And at each one of those levels, there's value-added services, and there's obviously a profit markup. And the people further down the supply chain have to pay for that profit that comes before them in the chain. With direct access, we're taking a farmer's coffee, they own that coffee all the way through till it's sold to a grocery distributor. And we're acting on the bottom there under direct access as a service provider, where we're simply being hired by the farmer to do all of those value-added services and get their coffee to the distributor. Next slide, please. Financially, this looks a lot different when you compare the 2 models. This, I admit, is an eye chart. So I will point out the two kind of major numbers to look at. On the top, I've taken a 12-ounce bag of coffee. That's what you pick up off the shelf when you go to the grocery store. And I have shown under the status quo where all the money flows at different parts of the supply chain. And I've used real-world numbers when I've broken this down. So I've taken a coffee that would sell for $3 green when it comes to a U.S. port. I've then assumed the Latin America average production cost for that coffee. I've assumed it's going to sell for $12.99 on the shelf at grocery, and the grocer is going to take a 35% margin. When I track all the money throughout the supply chain, in this example, this farmer would be like 50% of the specialty coffees in Colombia, specialty coffee growers in Colombia last year. So this farmer made nothing in gross profit per each 12-ounce bag that worked its way through the system. Us, as a roaster, made $2.93. Now, look on the bottom at the direct access model. What we're able to do is have the farmer or the farmer and a financing partner pay all the upfront costs of getting their coffee through to a grocery distributor. And once that happens, the farmer is able to capture 71 cents in gross profit per 12-ounce bag. For the average 5-acre farm, that's over $50,000 a year. Us, we're able to capture $2.21 gross profit per bag. Some people might say you're making less money for direct access, and it's true. Per bag, in real dollar terms, we're making less money. However, On top, with the status quo, we have a 42% margin when we sell through a grocery broker and distributor onto the grocer. Under direct access, looking at the $2.21 versus our roasting, labor, and utilities, we're making an 84% margin. So we're actually more profitable in those terms. Next slide, please.
All right, so this slide shows kind of our idea of what a meta brand means. And we used endangered species chocolate bars, which a lot of people are familiar with, as the best example we could kind of find. The main takeaway is that it has a unified appearance as a brand. However, it has the capability to call out individual causes. So for them, it's different species of animal. For us, it would be, highlighting our partner farms on the packaging. Next slide. And then this is a real quick look at the potential market share that we're trying to capture. So according to industry data, 62 million Americans purchase coffee at the grocery store to drink at home, and this is specialty coffee. On average, we drink 3 8-ounce cups of coffee a day, roughly 40 cents a cup. If you do the math on that, it translates to $27 billion industry. Next slide.
So this is our strategy of execution. I like to speak it in 2 veins. One is our product strategy, and then in parallel with that, we have a sourcing strategy. So the product strategy is fairly straightforward. We have coffees committed from 3 co-ops right now, one in Guatemala, one in Nicaragua, and one in Colombia for our direct access program. We're assessing a coffee from Ethiopia and one from Java that have been submitted by farmers there as well. And in April, we'll roll those coffees out in local grocery under our direct access brand. Additionally, we'll sell direct to consumer online and sell through Amazon. In phase 2, we'll move to pick up regional grocery accounts. Phase 3, we'll move on to national grocery accounts. And even though it doesn't need to be sequential, in phase 4, we will look for product extensions. So taking these direct access coffees and putting them into cold brews or functional coffee drinks or other packaging formats. In line with this, our sourcing plan is to do in phase 1 what we're doing now, which is working with co-ops who are financially capable to import their coffees to the US on their own. In phase 2, we'll start to do our own sourcing at origin and ask producers to put a small percentage of their crop into our system to prove out viability to them. So far, our conversations are pretty easy. We ask farmers, do you want more money or do you want less money at the end of the day? And they all kind of want more money. So it's been pretty easy to get the co-ops that we're working with on board to date. In phase 3, we look to go back to those same producers and get them to commit larger percentages of their crop while we continue to increase our portfolio. And then in phase 4, again, this doesn't have to be sequential with sourcing. We want to add value at the farm level. So low-hanging fruit is standing up social media accounts that we're able to give to those farmers and say, now you have a brand presence in the US through our direct access meta brand, and now you can capture content at the farm level, promote your brand, and increase your sales at grocery in the US on your own. Additionally, long-term, we think that there will be opportunity for community-level financing partners for a lot of our farmers. Next slide, please. This is the traditional hockey stick up into the right chart. If we do everything right based on a ton of assumptions I'd love to talk with you about later, we'll have revenues north of 40 million at year 5, EBITDA north of 10 million. I'd like to point out that for the first 3 years, we'll be operating in a deficit. Next slide. To close that gap, we currently have a seed round open. We're raising $500,000 in convertible debt. We anticipate needing to raise an additional $4 million over the next 3 years in additional series. Next slide, please. All right, and then this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. We want to achieve a financially sustainable model for smallholder coffee farmers. We want to positively impact the global flow of people, so we think that it's worthwhile to have livelihoods that can be sustained in rural areas and to continue the tradition of small farm coffee growth. We want to create a meta brand that has a true value proposition that's different than anything else on the shelf in grocery and really allow this to scale and have impact for our industry. We would like to take direct access and take it from a brand and make it a certification that has really, really simple auditing and that can be taken to other industries. So this would be a slam dunk right now for chocolate, for vanilla, for cashew butter, and someday we could see this happening domestically for grains that are grown in smallholder farms or potentially for grass-fed beef. And then lastly, within 5 to 7 years, we would like to exit with a $100 million sale, and we would like to take this to a larger company who's able to continue to mainstream the direct access concept. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for Colin, Matt, and Richard the Mule. All right, so really quick, we're going to have a drawing really quick. So let's have, I want to make sure you know the Idaho Technology Council folks. Jess Furman, if you can raise your hand. She's our Director of Business Development right here. Back here also is Chris Slaughter and also David Moore. And coming up here is a person that's going to be our new project coordinator is Fioko Louie. So we're going to draw, those who put their names in this, we have a couple things we're going to do. Fioko, go ahead and just reach in there and grab one. We'll see who won. This is big. This is big, guys. $25. It's to, oh, Fioko Louie. That was really good. Well done. Well played. Okay. All right, this is one, Chris Fry. Where are you, Chris? Come on, we'll take it to you, Chris. Go ahead and stay there. Chris, good job. Way to be. Who's the next one? Oh, Fioko really wanted me to take Fioko on this one. That would be, okay. Oh, Don Murray. Where are you, Don? Over there. Okay, we'll get that to Don. We'll get you our $25 gift certificate and Chris. So again, thanks for all of our sponsors, and thanks to that, and Fioko, thanks for taking that to those. And we now are going to start our keynote on this. And by the way, we'll be watching what's going to be happening with Cafe Mule and Ironstein Roasting in 3 to 5 years. We'll have you back on the stage to tell us about what's happening with it. So, Andy Scott, come on up. Andy's going to be our keynote speaker. Going to be talking about the Albertson story, which is extraordinary. Andy's a good friend who's also going to be retiring from Albertsons, right? On the first, is that all right if I say that?
Yes, yes. If you didn't, I would.
Then you will, okay.
Yeah.
And we need to run with this because Andy's got a great story he's going to talk about. So let's hear it for Andy Scoggin.
What a pleasure this is. Idaho Technology Council has as all of you I think know, but has a powerful name and brand across the state of Idaho and beyond, and it's come through some strong, indomitable efforts and will by people like, especially led by Jay and the people that you met here today. And I currently sit on the Idaho State Board of Education. Ron knows that because he and I just left the meeting. They're still carrying on, so I got to go back and go to work over there with Idaho Business for Education. Chair that board. Some of the members of that organization are here today, which we appreciate. And through businesses that I'm involved in, every one of them, ITC comes up over and over again. The reason I raise those is that ITC is impacting the face of Idaho for the future, and we're so grateful for the work that's being done. And I'm grateful to tell you an Albertson story. I'm really going to tell you an Idaho story real quick here. And I started with Albertsons 27 years ago as a junior executive, you might call it, coming from the Bay Area, where I'd been working with a law firm. I thought the the biggest downside to taking the job, which I was fairly interested in, was a growing company at the time. Really interesting opportunity, but I was going to have to live in Idaho, and my wife kind of felt the same way because she'd grown up I grew up in the East Coast, New Jersey, but she grew up in Oregon, and she used to have to drive through Boise, which was basically a truck stop. And so when we thought we're going to come to this state, we'd be here for a little while and then we'd have to move on. I found out that this state in so many ways is one of the most remarkable places, not only to live, which we all know, but for business and the business history that goes back here. So that's what I'd start with. To take you back to where I am with Albertsons LLC, which has now become Albertsons Companies, Inc., which is now the second largest grocery chain in the nation. I want to go back quite a ways and point this at what? Okay, so when I do this, skip through the video because I'm not going to have time for it, and we'll jump to the first slide there if we can. So this is a remarkable beginning of the story. So these are 6 brothers. Their mom and dad moved here from Midwest. Their dad was a Methodist minister, and they moved to a little town in American Falls, Idaho. And raise your hand if you know who these 6 brothers are. There we go. Oh, you were at the speech last week. I already did this. Okay, so these are the 6 Skaggs brothers. So there were 12 kids in the Skaggs family, 6 brothers and 6 sisters. And the brothers all went by initials, as did the dad. The dad was SM Skaggs. And he had OP, MB, LL, LS, LJ, and SA. And there they are. And so dad, as I say, was a minister, not making a lot of money, big family, 12 kids. How does he feed them? So he built a little shack by the railroad siding in American Falls, Idaho, where he could buy case lots of food, put them in this little shed, and then what he would do is feed the family wholesale now, and then sell the rest of it to his neighbors. And he named that store Skaggs Cash Store. And at the time, the most common way of selling groceries, drugs, et cetera, prescriptions, well, not prescriptions so much, but medications, et cetera, was on credit. So there was farmers, the crops came in, they could pay, and so you had an account, and we've all seen the old, Little House on the Prairie, put it on my account kind of stuff. Well, he wouldn't do that. He was a cash-only store, one of the kind of innovations that he put into place. And I'm going to tell you how that played into the name of that store as it changed over time. But MB, his third son, when he turned 21, said, I'm going to buy this little Skaggs Cash Store for my dad and grow it into something in our local community that I could be proud of and have a little store. Well, that little store that he bought and partnered up with his 3 of his other brothers grew rapidly. And all of a sudden, this is 1915, Dad opened the store. 1921, son bought it. And 1919, son bought it, and his other brothers helped him with it. They created Skaggs United Stores and Skaggs Cash Stores. And then it started growing through the, not just Idaho, but into the Northwest, and now down into Arizona and all these other places. Really interesting story in and of itself. But Skaggs, MB Skaggs had a big vision once he realized what the grocery industry could do for him, and he met a guy named Charles Merrill. And Charles Merrill was on the brink of starting another business called Merrill Lynch, but as he was starting that, he was also interested in what MB was doing, so they combined forces and they created a chain called Safeway. So MB Skaggs started, or SM, the dad, and then MB started the first Safeway store in 1915 in American Falls, Idaho, and grew that thing to be a major player. But what's really interesting is that MB's brothers weren't sitting around watching MB grow his own chain. He had a brother, OP, who started a chain that they called Save-On Drugs. And so OP built and then sold that to a fellow by the name of Christian Call, and that became one of the largest drug chains in the nation. LL went to the Midwest and started a couple of chains, one called Pay and Take It Store, the other called Osco Drug. If anyone has ever been to Chicago, that is the largest chain of drugstores in the Midwest, and actually at one time had been in Arizona, had been in Texas, had been throughout the Midwest and the South. So that's Owner's Service Company. That was LL. LJ, he went off to Tacoma, Washington, and he opened a chain called Payless Drugs. So we've got these brothers, and there's well over a dozen companies that you've heard of, but I wanted to give you a sense of just within my little industry what these brothers were doing over the period of about 40 years. One of the guys that they hired, he was going to school, going to college, and they hired him part-time, to work through the stores, became a department manager, became a store director, was doing such a good job that before he even got out of college, LJ, or LS, another brother, who was working with MB and ended up running the whole region for Safeway stores out of Salt Lake City, was out there trying to find who can run these little stores that they were running as kind of their own little companies. And he found this guy that was doing well in the store, promoted him up to store director, district manager, and said, hey, you don't even need to graduate college. Come work for us. You're going to have a great career with Safeway. Joe Albertson, out of College of Idaho, started with Safeway stores, worked his way up through the stores, and became a store director. So he becomes a district manager, and he says, you know what? I believe that I could start a store in Boise, Idaho, and someday hit, and we've got him on tape saying this, when he started off, hit $1 million in revenue someday on my store, and that would be a success. I could raise my family on it. I could have a great local business, Albertson store. So down in 16th and State, he wants to start this store. He finds a plot of land. Now, this is 1939. So in 1939, there's a significant macroeconomic event occurring throughout the world. Great Depression. You don't start a business in the middle of a Great Depression. Joe believed very strongly in what he could do. So he said, I'm going to do this. He didn't have any money. But he had an idea. At the time, in 1939, the average grocery store was 2,000 square feet in space. Joe designed a 10,000 square foot store, 5 times the normal. Why were they 2,000 square feet? Because you still went to the butcher in the 30s to get your meat. You still went to the dairy, or the milkman delivered your milk to you. You went to the baker and you got your baked goods, etc. He wanted to put them in one place so that all of that food would be under one roof, and put some other innovations like a ice cream counter, which was in some drugstores but not in grocery stores. And he served up ice cream cones. He would hand dip them himself. They called them Big Joe's, Joe Albertson. So he had all these ideas. He needed money. He needed 15 grand is what it came down to. So he turns to LS, who had hired him and seen the promise of this young man, and says, do you want to come in with me? LS puts in 5,000. LS has an accountant named Tom Cuthbert who worked for LS. He puts in 5,000. So now we got 10. We need 5 more. Joe goes to Catherine, his wife's aunt, and says, you want to invest? And he gives her equity. Smartest thing she ever did, $5,000. And so there's 15,000. Opened that store in 1939, June 20-something or other. So let's see what we can get here. Safeway. All right, I'm clicking. There's Joe. Future supermarket magnate. And let's look at that grand opening. So July 21st, I think, in 1939, he advertises, plenty of parking space. Here's my store. We still own that spot on 16th and State. Many of you have shopped there. Store's different, but the space is still the same. Does so well in year 1, year 2, year 3, that he opens stores in Napa, he opens stores in Caldwell, gets up into Spokane. These stores are doing well. Over the next 8 years, he turns to these 2 partners and he says, hey, I'll buy you out for 50 grand for your 5 grand each stake, 50 grand each. And they take it and they go. So 10 times their money, each sold off a third of the company. When Joe passed away, his ownership in the company was worth $3 billion. They would have each had a third of that. They sold for $50,000. But they thought they'd done pretty well. LS, in fact, said, I'm going to take my $50,000 and I'm going to go buy some of the drugstores that my brother has, Skaggs drugstores in northern Utah. And he buys 4 of them and he grows them to 9. And he passes away in his mid-50s, and he has a son, Sam, also LS, but goes by his middle name, Sam. So Sam Skaggs is 21 years old. Dad passes away. He's got 9 drugstores in northern Utah. Sam takes those and grows them into what, for a very short time, was the largest grocery chain in the nation, called American Stores. Some of you may have heard of it. American Stores owned Jewel Osco, and Osco was his uncle's company. American Stores owned Alpha Beta and Lucky Stores and Acme on the East Coast, and Save on Drug, another of his uncle's companies. He grows this over 1,000 store chain across the country over about 45 years. So these Skaggs, it's in their blood, it's in their brain. They take risks, they grow companies. A lot of fights along the way. Amazing story. If you ever just read the American Store story alone, it's a fascinating story. So really amazing. Sam grows that company, and as he's growing along, so let me see what our next slide is, because I don't remember what are in these slides, so it'll surprise me too. So Joe, in the meantime, in 1959, takes his company public on the New York Stock Exchange. And so in 59, they go public, and they grow this company over the next 60s and 70s and 80s as a public company, and the stock returns are phenomenal. In fact, in the 80s, the Wall Street Journal has an article in which they called it the best stock buy in the universe, Albertson stock. And some of you may have bought some Albertson stock back in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. If so, you did really well. But let's see what's next here. So we're growing the company. Let's try another one. Growing the company. And in 1998, so in the early 90s, something dramatic changes in the grocery industry. A company that started as kind of a discount company that was selling, like fishing rods and clothing and household goods, named Walmart, Sam Walton, decides to get into food. They've never done food, so they're going to get into food. Why do they want to get into food? Not because they're going to make a lot of money on food, but because they're only getting people to come to Walmart a couple times a month when they need to stock up. What if I can get them to come a couple times a week? Because while they're here, they're going to buy all this other stuff in the store. So they go into food, lost leader. The whole grocery industry mocks them because they're never going to figure it out, because they know how to ship bikes, but they don't know how to ship groceries, and everything's going to be a disaster for them. Today, Walmart is the largest seller of groceries in the United States by far. Sells more than Kroger, sells more than Albertsons, sells more than anyone. So they figured it out, as they always do. But at the same time, a little company on the West Coast, or two companies merge, Priceco and Costco, and they start to grow. And so everybody in the grocery industry realizes that you're either going to be really small or you're going to be really big, and Albertsons was stuck in the middle. So they said, we're going to get really big. And they went to talk to American Stores. So American Stores, remember, started by the son of one of the Albertsons founders, and the companies come together in an $11.7 billion stock and debt deal. Huge, huge deal. The biggest deal that ever been done in the grocery industry to that time. And amazing stories along the way. One of them that a lot of you wouldn't know, because it didn't get a lot of publicity, but this deal got done in New York City after many late nights, and there were three parties to this deal: Albertsons, American Stores, and Kmart. And within an hour of signing the deal, Kmart pulled out, or this would have been a true disaster. Instead, it was only a minor disaster, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So let's go to the next one. So bad mergers can wreck good companies. So this made Albertsons a huge company. The board, a lot of the senior executives, great business people, but they really went into this, and I was there at the time, not involved in all this, but like a lot of us watching what was going on, realized that our strategy to acquire was much stronger than our strategy to integrate and grow a combined business. And so literally within the first year, things, the wheels started spinning off, and you had multiple very strongly opinionated leaders with very different approaches to running the company, going out and basically preaching their way of doing things, and they were highly contradictory in many ways. And so everything, how do we account? How do we distribute? How do we market? How do we, are we high-low? Are we everyday low price? No agreement. And so this was in 1999 that this got done. The board realized that having a leader either from either one of the former companies was going to be very difficult. So they brought in someone that was literally worse than either one of the companies could have been. Some of you may remember Larry Johnston, and some of you may not, but which is fortunate for you. But I was there, and he was a tough leader to deal with in many ways. But the main thing that happened is that we began to make even more difficult decisions for a company than we'd had up until then. And so within 5 years of him coming, the board said we're just going to have to put Albertsons on the market and sell it for pieces, because it's slid so quickly on a revenue standpoint, The costs were rising rapidly, revenues were flat, and we got to do something with it. So let's see what we got next here. So what are we going to do? So there's drugstores, the Save On Drug chain in particular, Albertsons had acquired through that American Stores deal, sold those to CVS. Now you have 1,800 grocery stores. And about 1,200 of those are really doing pretty well. But 600 of them, so we got 2/3 and 1/3, 650 of them or so are doing terribly, losing a lot of money. Nobody's put any money into them. Larry, one of the things he created when he came was core stores and non-core stores, and so the 650 were the non-core, so you also didn't put any money into them for 7 years. No new roofs, cracks in the parking lots, leaking refrigeration. Stores in areas that had been really strong through the 60s, 70s, and 80s were just, had fallen apart. So the board says we can sell these 1,200 really good stores, but what do we do with the others? So eventually SuperValu, some of you will remember that name, out of Minnesota, who'd really been a wholesaler for most of their history and had acquired a few small chains around the nation, they say, well, we want to get big on the retail side, and this is the way to do it, and buy some really good stuff, as we call it, the crown jewels. So they buy those for $12.1 billion. Take a lot of debt, but they're going to run those. And they acquire also all of the infrastructure from the Albertsons company, which means all the computer infrastructure, financials, everything else. They get it all. But they can't complete the deal till they find someone to basically, take the stuff nobody wants, which is this one. So eventually a consortium comes together that says, we think we can do something with these. Thank you, Jay. We think we can do something with these stores. Why? Not because we think they're going to be great grocery stores, but because if you flip forward, I think 2, but let's see what we got here. Yeah, go one more. So this is the consortium of 5 groups, and you'll notice something that's fairly consistent in their names. So Lupert Adler Realty, Claff Realty, Kimco Realty, Schottenstein Stores. This is 2006. 2007 and 2008 were not great years for real estate. You know this. We all know this. 2006 was a really good year for real estate. So you're looking at the bad stores are in Florida, which was very hot in 2005, 2006. You could buy any property and sell it the next day for twice what you bought it for. Arizona, Texas, Northern California, Denver. These were hot real estate markets. Terrible stores, but great real estate markets. They say, well, we can buy these, and we can probably turn around and flip them within the next 2 years. But we're going to need somebody to run them, clean them up, get them going. So that's where we go back one slide, and hopefully most of you recognize that person, Bob Miller. So Bob Miller, very quickly, had started his career with Albertsons in 1961, working as a bottle sorter in Southern California after school, lived in a single mom household, contracted polio at age, I think, 7 or 8, was in an iron lung, wasn't supposed to be able to walk, walked to this day with a limp, but became, I love this stuff, became captain of the football team with a limp. We have a, where's Fehoko? Where did he go? Anyway, the intern that was here was, by the way, is Boise State football captain this last year too. So football captains, do pretty well. And so he was captain of the football team in his high school. He was working after school. He was a bottle sorter, which he says is, the greatest desire he had as a bottle sorter is to get promoted to be a courtesy clerk. I mean, that's how low the bottle sorters were. You sit in the back room and you take all the recycled bottles. In the early 1960s, he's working after school doing that. And again, these people within the organization see the potential of this guy and say he wants to go to college and maybe even play sports. And his store director says, hey, I'm going to make you a department manager. Stick around, earn some money before you go to college. Well, he never went to college because he became a store director, then became a district manager, became a division president, and he worked his way up from 61 until 92. He's the executive vice president of operations for all of Albertsons at that time, came up through under Joe Albertson himself, Warren McCain, some of you remember that name, who's a huge mentor of his. And he's doing great, and a regional chain, struggling in the Northwest, and we now know it as a very successful chain, but at the time in the early 90s was struggling, owned by private equity groups, called Fred Meyer, calls and wants to recruit him away from Albertsons, and eventually they do, and he becomes CEO of Fred Meyer in short order. And this is a story all of its own and a book that should be written. He takes that little struggling chain and creates the largest grocery chain in the West Coast over the next 7 years. Buys Ralph's in Southern California, Smith's in Utah, Fry's, QFC up in Washington State, Hughes Family Markets, and a number of others, and creates this very strong and powerful and profitable chain on the West Coast. Kroger at this time was the very strong Midwest, East Coast, well, Midwest and Southern chain, but has nothing on the West Coast. Wants to get there, doesn't want to get there, building one store at a time. They come knocking. They eventually arrange a deal. Highest multiple, because Fred Meyer had been public, went public, and this sold for the highest multiple ever to this day. That deal of Fred Meyer and company selling to Kroger. Bob becomes the vice chairman of the board of Kroger, chief operating officer. Thinks, hey, I'm done. I've had an almost 40-year career. And some of those people that he'd done, made rich again in the Fred Meyer deal as investors are also invested in a company called Rite Aid. Rite Aid's struggling dramatically because they had done incredibly well for about 7 or 8 years by cooking the books. CEO goes to prison, CFO goes to prison, and head of HR is indicted for backdating stock. All kinds of terrible stuff's going on. These same investors say, we know the one guy that can turn around retail. They call Bob, who's getting ready to retire from Kroger, and say, hey, would you come over and help us fix Rite Aid? They've got 9 months of cash left. We need somebody that can get this thing going. He got there, and the first thing he realized is, and he's asked by Maria Bartiromo on CNBC, how do you feel now that you're in the place about a month in? He said, well, I wouldn't have taken the job if I'd realized that they said 9 months, they meant 90 days of cash. So here he is, 9 days of cash. He sells and restructures everything. He sells their helicopters. He sells artwork off the walls. He goes to work on fixing the stores because that's what he does. And eventually, within a year, they get completely restructured. They're in good shape. 3 years later, steps up to be chairman of the board, says, okay, now I'm done. Mary Sammons, who had been with him at Fred Meyer, becomes he puts her in CEO. Great running little company. He's going to step off. He's on Nordstrom's board. He's on Harris' board. He's taking them public. He's doing all this other stuff. I don't need another job. Those darn investors call him again and say, hey, we're interested in buying these junky grocery stores, and we need someone to turn them around, and we think you can do it. And Bob said, I wouldn't do it for anything else but to be able to go back and take care of Joe's stores again. So he sets out, and he says, if I can find a small crew that can put this together, I'll do it. So over the next couple of weeks, he starts calling people, and I am the luckiest person in my career, in Boise, because I get a call, go up to Hillcrest, meet a guy I had never met, who offers me a job, and here's on this little team he's putting together, and here's what he says: I don't need to work again. I've had a great career, but I think that we can put this group together and save tens of thousands of jobs. I think we can. Our little 7 people, and we're never going to get more than 20 people. He told me that. He told us all, we'll have 20 people in our corporate office, and that's the biggest we'll ever get. We have 3,500 right now, but we're only going to get 20. And we are going to, and we might make a little money, but I can't promise that we'll do that. But because these are really in bad shape, and I don't know if we can do this, but I think we can, and I believe we can if I get the right team and we get together. So on June 2nd, 2006, 8 of us, Bob plus 7, so CFO, Chief Marketing Officer, me, General Counsel, and a couple other people. We meet together on June 2nd. We basically wheel our stuff across the parking lot from Albertsons into the old Ore-Ida building, and we start this little company. And so let's go forward a couple of slides here, and let's see what we can see. Yeah, so this is our 2006 to 2013 sales growth. We had a really great experience over those 7 years because we took $300 million that basically our investors gave us to buy those stores, and over those 7 years we returned $2.2 billion to them, trimmed the company to about 200 really strong stores, and we had about $4 billion in sales, and we were doing well, and we thought, okay, we're happy, we can kind of put this on autopilot, and the 7 of us we got some decent equity in the company. We'll run this thing. We actually went to Cerberus and Group and said, hey, can we buy this from you? Because they were thinking of unloading it. And our chairman of the board, who's from Cerberus, said, and he's told this story to us many times, as soon as Bob walked in the door and said he wants to buy it from us, we no longer want to sell. So instead they said, hey, could you go talk to SuperValu, because next slide, this was their 7 years. From 2006 to 2013, they didn't have a single positive year of sales growth, 28 consecutive quarters of negative sales, which is hard to do. It's hard to compound positive sales. It's even harder to compound negative sales, because at some point, how low can you go? And they're good people, but they had the wrong strategies in place. So we went to them, and long story short, so we negotiated this in Minnesota in February, which was a really bad place to be. We should have negotiated it in Arizona, but we negotiated in Minnesota in these rooms. We couldn't go outside because it was so cold. So we finally got a deal done, and let's see what we got next here. We acquired those assets all back. SuperValu's board actually wanted us to buy the whole company. SuperValu's in such bad shape, we couldn't finance it. So we could only buy back what they'd bought, which was those essentially 1,100 stores or so, and they'd sold a few of them. They sold Utah, which broke our hearts because we knew that was a good market. But we got back Idaho. I'd been living here for 7 years, running Albertsons. My neighbors would tell me what's wrong with the store. I said, we don't own those. They'd say, well, you work for Albertsons. I said, not that Albertsons. They didn't understand it. We got them back. So now we could do something with those, the Northwest, Southern California, et cetera, for $3.3 billion. You remember what SuperValu paid for those? It was $12.1 billion. We bought them back for $3.3 because we're we like to buy low, sell high. So this is what happened the next 3 years with those stores and this is absolutely true. We were running, so in our industry, about a 2% sales growth per annum is solid. That's what leaders do. We were running these stores in this company at 8%, first year, 10% sales increase, 12% the third year. Our darn investors said, wow, you guys are doing great. We saw this other company that's kind of flatlined, and they've got a ton of technology, which we still didn't have because SuperValu bought all that, and we're still owning it, and we were paying them $200 million a year to run our back office all those years on a transition services agreement. Hey, we found a company. Let's see if we've got it here. Remember who Joe started working for, Full Circle, Skaggs Brothers company was for sale. So we went and met with them, and eventually we agreed to buy 100% of stock. This took about 7 months, but we agreed to buy 100% of their stock off the stock market, take them private, and merge their stores in with ours. And so we had a lot of overlapping areas, and so we had to sell some stores through an FTC agreement, et cetera. But in the end, what we absolutely did was we kept everybody's name where they were. We didn't start changing names of stores. Going back to one of the things that Albertsons Inc. did wrong way back when they did the American Stores deals, American Stores had a very strong brand, just as one example, in the West Coast called Lucky Stores. And Lucky Stores had a powerful name, powerful price image, et cetera, et cetera. Consultants said to Albertsons, hey, if you want to just have one ad, if you want to reduce cost, get rid of Lucky and make them all Albertsons, which Albertsons did, had a big, huge California-wide marketing campaign called The Marriage of the Century, and we had these really cool TV commercials where you had one cart going down the aisle with a veil on it, another one with a top hat on it, and we lost Lucky and never got those sales back. So we said, and Bob Miller said, we're not doing that, so we're going to keep the names, we're going to do no harm. So, and that kind of works out because let's say you're in a little town in Washington State and you have a bad experience with a checker at an Albertsons. I'm going to show you, I'm going to Safeway. I will buy over there from now on. I'm never shopping here again. We go, okay. So that was our merger. Everybody, we brought them back together again. Now we are the second largest grocery chain in the nation. Let's go ahead. But what that meant was from 2012 to 2015, this was a very, very, very hard thing to do because we went from 192 stores in just under 4 years to 2,200 stores. We went from 20,000 employees to 250,000 employees. We went from $4 billion in sales to $60 billion in sales. We're now going to hit $63 billion this year. That growth in 3 or 4 years, for any of you who've grown companies, is tremendously hard, and we had an incredibly strong integration team that we put to work on this stuff. But probably so there's an amazing backstory to all of what we did, and I've got this other presentation I do with 18 principles that we use throughout this to turn these things around, or I won't say we turn them around, the people that were out there in the field turn them around. But one of the first things Bob Miller said when we started this company was, we're going to be decentralized, which means that the stores are going to be, and the divisions are going to be making most of the decisions that affect a customer. So after year one, so 2006 we started the company, and year two, 2007, we had a 1-year anniversary, and I go into Bob's office, and actually Bob was in a cubicle. He put us in offices. He put himself in a cubicle when we started this business because he was traveling a lot in his other business. He said, you guys do the offices. So I go over to him and I said, Bob, I want to do a 1-year, really cool newsletter video from you talking about how well we did. And Bob said to me, we're not doing that. I said, why not? He said, that's not how we're running the company. And he'd said these things, but I never really got it till then. He said, we're going to do 8 newsletters with 8 videos from our 8 division presidents talking to their division employees, not me. That's how we run the company. And because we started the business that way, when we started growing these, we could focus on all that integration stuff because we didn't have to worry about what was going on the shelves, what the price was, what the promotions were, what the product was, what the placement was. So the 4 Ps of marketing and merchandising, we weren't worried about that. We were worried about making sure that the support was getting taken care of. We were combining the financials. We were combining systems. We were figuring out how to get all the financing done, everything else, while they took care of that stuff out at the store level. And they did it. And they couldn't have done it if we thought we had to run every single decision by somebody in Boise. We didn't do that. And that was one of the pieces of magic that helped us to be able to do what we did. We took on a lot of debt. We went from, by the way, the only debt-free grocery chain that I could find in the nation in 2011, we paid off our last loan and we were debt-free, to having almost $12 billion in debt to get all this stuff done that our investors wanted us to get done. We are today below $8 billion in debt. Over the last 3 years, we've paid off over $4 billion. We are at 3 times EBITDA to debt, with a trajectory to get us to 2.6. 3 times is investment grade. We've been able to do that again because we're worried about doing that while we're not letting our stores worry about that. And so this company is in incredibly solid shape for everything that we need to do. Technology's changing, everything else is changing. Let's see what else we got here. So what does Joe's company look like today? Let's go again. National presence. We've got fuel stations, we've got pharmacies, we've got a lot of home delivery. We will have almost $500 million in home delivery. You don't think of us as a home delivery company, and yet $500 million this year we'll spend just on or we'll receive in revenue on home delivery as well, and pick up at the store and everything else that everybody else is doing. We've got really smart people working on where that's going to change, where that's going to turn. Nobody makes money at it right now, by the way, as you can all imagine. It's very expensive, but you got to be in it to play the game. And we were experimenting with things. We started things up. We've stopped them. We've pushed more money behind the things that are working great. We just took one of our distribution centers that we built back in the 90s in Arizona, and we put $100 million into it last year, and it's now fully automated, which is amazing because these little robots just run around picking up stuff. It doesn't matter where it's in the distribution center. When it's humans, and we have wonderful human order selectors, they have to know everything has to be lined up perfectly for them. These guys just put it by algorithm wherever there's an opening, and then they remember where it is and go back and pick it up. And the coolest thing was, one day when these people had just finished it, they brought us down as executive team and said, hey, we want to show you all this stuff, but the first thing we want to do is turn off the lights. Pitch dark, and they just kept on working. Because they don't care if there's light, they don't care if there's heat or air conditioning, they don't care about any of that stuff. They just keep going. And they are doing an amazing job. But what we were able to do is take a bunch of those order selectors that worked for us for 20 years and send them back to school, and now they're running the computers and the software and Idaho Technology Council kind of stuff that you guys care about. We're now upgrading hundreds of people in those across the country. We just did our Chicago one, and we're moving on with them. So we've got really exciting things going on. Let's take a look. What I would say is, so that's kind of our growth. I won't spend time here, but you can see a lot of banners. We're at 23 banners now across the country. We did some other acquisitions I haven't even talked about, but one of them was United Supermarkets down in Texas. Well, guess what? They have an incredible store called the Marketplace Store. So we brought those guys up and said, hey, we want to do something on Broadway here in Boise, Idaho, but we don't know how to do it. So that company, which when we bought them, Bob Miller said, don't touch United, don't go visit them for 6 months from Boise. We don't want them to know you exist, because they were a very successful company out of Lubbock, Texas. And then we brought them up here, and they helped us develop these new marketplace concepts that we've now taken across the country. So we did a bunch of other stuff I don't even have time to tell you about. But what I would say is most important in this whole thing, and I'll finish with this, is that it wasn't about sales and revenues and acquisitions and real estate and everything else. But let's go to the next slide, and I think we got a video. Can you play it?
On the average day, the average person comes in contact with countless other average persons. But how many actually affect us?
Very few. Very few.
Then the average person walks into the Albertsons on Vista Avenue
Hello.
and runs right into Peter Steffens. For Peter,
Good to see you again.
every day is a conveyor belt of kind comments
That sounds good. Good luck. I hope you did well, man.
and constant chuckles and crack-ups.
I work in a mostly Jewish neighborhood, and I work at a kosher store where we deal with different kosher needs, such as kosher meats and also kosher fish. It's been a great experience working there. I love what I do. I have exciting customers that come in that makes my day, and it's been a great part of my life throughout my years of working for Jewel. And the really fun thing about that, I really take interest in when a younger person wants to know, how did my grandma do it? And they'll come in the store and they'll say, Forrest, you knew my mom. Can you tell me, how did she do her gefilte fish? I want to get that same taste that I got when I was a little girl. And you know what? That touches my heart. This is what Jewel is all about. Service, second to none.
Chris got a new trailer last night.
Seth is autistic, and he absolutely positively adores trucks, specifically Safeway trucks.
I want to be a Safeway truck driver when I grow up.
Really?
Yeah.
He studies a map of all the Safeway stores in the region.
Auburn 531.
He memorizes the numbers of each store and every delivery truck.
He likes it watching you unload so that he can sit here and hang out with you.
Yeah. And I get to hang out with him, and if it puts me behind at night, I don't care.
It means so much to our son. He's taken the time to be part of this young man's life.
In a positive way.
Yeah. So, sorry.
Entire neighborhoods like this burned to the ground.
The house is gone. I haven't seen it. I saw my next door neighbor's picture. Our whole street's gone.
Bob Boyett says he lost everything, but that's not stopping him and many others from helping. He's opened up his grocery stores to feed firefighters and first responders.
It's our job to take care of our community and do what we can, and we got all the stores open. This is my family. These are my people here.
Some days you just catch people on good days and they're generally happy, but they're not Pete happy.
I just put a smile on and keep going, because somebody's going to want that smile. Somebody's going to need it. Yeah, I remember that guy, and he's such a cool dude.
Got 280,000 people who have kids and grandkids. They're going to school and going to college. They're coaching soccer teams. They're part of they're the school board. They're their neighborhoods. They're raising families, and they get up every day. And this is the amazing thing about businesses like this and your business is most of these people will never meet in their entire lives, and yet every day they're getting up and working for the same purpose and building the same thing together all across the United States to take care of customers. And these are on our 10th anniversary, and that's our 10th anniversary birthday cake. This is the team that we grew from our initial 8 of us, and there's Bob, and about 4 of us are originals, and then we've brought a bunch in since then. Today, we're 14 years in from starting Albertsons LLC, June 2006, almost 14 years, and of that original 8, 7 have retired. They did very well. 1's still working, but not for long. So that's what Jay said. So March 1, I trust that we've got the right people, we've got the right stuff going on in the company. 3 years ago, I tried to leave and have never felt like I could, but we're still very close. I talked to Bob yesterday. Most of the 8 of us are, in contact. We all have a very significant stake still in the company. And you've all, many of you, not all of you, but some of you have been listening or watching the news and Wall Street Journal, et cetera, who's suggested that we may be IPOing the company soon. So that's an interesting article. And if so, I think we're in pretty good shape to do something like that. So it's about the people. And for me, just as well, 27 years from the time I came here, if we go to the last slide here, I also got to do this. And that's my kids and my grandkids and all of my kids, 4 of them, plus my 2 daughters and their husbands, plus my 5 grandkids, out of any place they could live, any place they could work, they're all in Boise, Idaho. And that's where we want them. So I'm grateful for that journey. It's been an amazing ride. I think Blue Sky before Albertsons is just much brighter even than our last 14 years. And even when we didn't own a single store here for 7 years, we never hesitated to say, Boise's our hometown, and this is where we'll be forever. So thank you for your time. Thanks for the business you build. It's been great. I probably don't have time for questions, right?
I think that there's probably one question I'd like to ask, and then we probably need to, because of, what's the big difference between, I know this is leadership is always the key whenever you talk about how you grow an organization. You had Bob Miller being one of the most extraordinary leaders you've probably been around, right?
Yeah.
You've been around Larry. What's the big difference between those two?
So invite me back. We'll do this for an hour because that really is, all of us know that. I mean, we've been together with people who they don't micromanage, they trust you, but they also hold you to very rigorous standards. They have a vision. It's solid, but they're also, flexible when things come at you. They're great at telling stories that inspire, and they're also great at math because businesses are, all about, you've got to have a little bit more that stays after you've paid all the bills at the end of the day, and you have to be able to keep people around, and all of that is critical leadership style. And one thing I'm probably as proud of as anything is the first 3 years when nobody thought we'd make it, we didn't lose a single executive in any of our divisions, even though we had a lot of competitors trying to hire them away because they were great people. Not one person left. In fact, the woman that you saw standing next to me in that picture of our team at our 10th anniversary, her name's Susan Morris. Some of you may know Susan. She's now our Chief Operations Officer for the company. She was with SuperValue because, they got most of the employees, over 100,000. She ended up with them. She wanted to be with us. We had a no solicitation agreement with SuperValue, but eventually, and she was running, she was doing a lot of stuff. She was a VP for them. And she went to them and said, I want to go work for Albertsons. We weren't allowed to recruit her, but we said, yeah, we got a place for you, but it's like a manager level. We just didn't have much. And she went to SuperValue back in Minnesota and said, I want to go with these guys. And they said, if you stay with us, you have the next division president position in the second largest chain in the United States. We're going to give you a big slug of stock and everything else. And she said, nope, I want to go with these guys. We put her in. They let her go because, at some point you don't want to keep someone that really doesn't work for you. So we put her in Arizona as a grocery sales manager, like the 4th level down in a division. And she went to work. She believed in our vision. Within a year, we made her division president. Then we brought her into the corporate office, and now she's Chief Operations Officer for this company. Because of Bob Miller, because of Bob Butler, some of you remember Bob, and some of the others, that she'd seen what we were doing, and she said, I don't care how much money I get on the short term if I'm with a company that I don't believe is going to make it. So you've got to tell the story, and people have to believe it, and that's probably been as much of the magic as anything. But it's a great story. Many of you have been through those success stories, and I've tried to capture them. So when we hire new executives, I actually bring them in, and we go through the 18 principles that we followed that got us to where we are today. So anyway, thank you.
Sarah Frandy Scoggin. The Magi, Andy. How about this, Andy? We'll bring you back at another time to talk about those 18 principles, and we'll talk about those. Everybody, would that be good for everyone? Like that? Thanks, Andy. That was wonderful. All right. We just need you need to come up though. We have a conclusion. Let's hear it right now for Blake and Allison just for a minute, and then we'll talk about what's happening May 21st. Thanks. Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Blake.
Hi, everybody. We know we're over on time, so we'll be brief. We were trying to give Jay the cut. We're good. I'm Allison Johnson. I'm a partner over at Holland & Hart, and I co-chair the Capital Connect conference with Blake. We just want to say thank you to each of you for coming, supporting this event, supporting the businesses in our community. And we're excited to announce our next initiative, which is called 50 to the A. 50 to the A is a community-cultivated list showcasing the first 50 Idaho-based companies to receive Series A financing in 2020 and beyond. That's a really, really big goal for a community of our size, but we believe it's achievable, but only with the help of all of you in this room. We're here today in front of you guys to ask each of you to join us to help contribute your unique contributions, whether that's through mentorship, sitting on advisory boards, making financial investments, sharing market intelligence, becoming early adopters of the products and services that are being offered by our local companies, networking, helping make those critical introductions, publishing and sharing success stories, taking a chance on that early idea, promoting leaders in our community. What we want is we want all of us to be able to wave the flag as a community each time one of the companies in our community achieves the financial milestone of receiving a Series A financing. We'll be better as a community and share in the victory together if we all do our part to make that happen. Blake's going to talk a little bit about the deal flow report.
Oh no, we're done. We're done. But come to the Capital Connect event, May 21st. Join us. We'll have more details about this initiative and why it makes a difference for Idaho, for all of us going forward. So.
And how you can each be a part of it.
Please.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to all the presenters for sharing your stories, and we'll let you get on with your day.
Thank you.